Hey folks, Carl Schooff here, back with the TimelineLite Ultimate Starter Guide. In part 3, I'm going to talk to you about controlling the playback of your TimelineLite. If you take a look at the Schooff that's playing right now, you'll notice that it's fairly simple animation, but what we have here are a series of buttons and a slider control that are going to allow us to control how our TimelineLite plays back. I can do a very simple play, I can pause, I can reverse, I can fast forward, I can reverse at any time, or I can restart from the beginning. We'll be talking about a whole bunch of different methods to give you the ultimate control that you need. Now, all of these methods are fairly intuitive and pretty simplistic on their own. It's when you start combining them that there are a few different things that you're going to have to watch out for. So sit back, relax, and I'll show you how it's done. Okay, so over in Flash here, I have my document class opened up. And normally I take a lot of time explaining all the code that we have here, but we've already talked to you about how to create a TimelineLite. And this tutorial is going to focus strictly on how to control a TimelineLite. So I'm only going to take a brief amount of time to show you how it's set up, and towards the end of the class I'm going to give you some of the finer details of some of the tricks that I'm using. One of the most important things to point out about this file, though, is that all the text that you see in there, or 90% of it, is dynamic. So you'll see here I have this phrase set up that says you have the power to control your TimelineLite animation. And when I test this out, that is going to be you have the power to control your etc. etc. So all of that animation is based on the words that we see here. So I could at any time very easily say, after watching this video, you will have the power to control. So it's just a cool little technique, and I'll explain this part of it at the end. All you have to worry about now is that a TimelineLite has been built, and all it does is play. And we're going to configure these buttons and the slider component so that we can have ultimate control of this movie. I'll go over everything again at the end, but I want to go really quick and jump right into controlling this TimelineLite. And in this create timeline function that I have, you'll see that I'm referring to my TimelineLite as TL, okay? And I'm going through a little loop of going through that phrase of words and putting them on the stage, and I'm just in that loop appending some tweens, all right? Fairly basic stuff. That animation of that cute little character jumping out is actually a frame tween done by Tween Max. So I'm combining movie clip animation with scripted animation. That's totally legitimate. And we're tracking the progress as we would do in our previous video. And all those buttons that I had, let's scroll to the top, they all have very intuitive names: play button, pause button, reverse button, and they're all calling specific event listeners. So I'm going to be focusing on what do those buttons do. And the first button that we're going to come across is the play button, which calls the play handler. And TimelineLite shares a lot in common with a typical movie clip. And when Jack Doyle of Greensock created TimelineLite, there was a lot of similarity between the methods that he used in their naming to keep things easy for us. So to get a TimelineLite to play, you don't have to be too bright. We can just do tl.play, and it's a method name that we're familiar with. Now, in order to see this work, you have to understand that our TimelineLite is going to play by default. So if I want to test this button right away, well, it's already playing, so hitting play isn't going to do anything. What I could do, though, is go to my TimelineLite constructor, and I'm going to just pass in a special var, and I'm going to say paused equals true. Okay? And we discussed all this in the previous video. So now my TimelineLite is going to start paused, and as you would expect, when I hit the play button, it's going to play. If I want it to pause, take a guess at what we're going to do. Very good, class. So I'm going to scroll down here, and I'm just going to tell my pause handler to tell my TimelineLite instance to pause. And after this, it's going to get a little bit trickier, but it's great that it's simple, right? So let's just test it out. I don't want to go too far without checking to see if I've made a mistake. I'm going to play, I'm going to pause, and I'm going to play. Now the next button that comes up is the reverse button, which, as you would expect, would play the TimelineLite backwards. So I'm going to go to the next function that I have here, and I'm going to tell my TimelineLite to reverse. Now, when I type this in, you'll notice that the code completion gives me a force resume parameter, which is a Boolean, which can be true or false. By default, it's going to be true. And that means that we can reverse the timeline without continuing its playback. Right now, we're going to be fine with the default behavior. So let's save this and test it. And now I'm going to play, and I can reverse. And if I'm playing and I hit reverse, it automatically goes back in the other direction. If I'm playing forward and I hit pause, so notice that the TimelineLite is paused, when I hit reverse, it not only changes the direction that the playhead knows to go in, but it also drives the playhead backwards, and we see the animation. So if you wanted to use that force resume and you pass in false, this is not the default behavior. That means that only the direction of the TimelineLite would change, but it wouldn't make sure that it continues moving in the reverse direction. So I'm just going to save this real quick, and I'm going to play, and then if I pause, you'll notice that reverse doesn't do anything visible. But what's happening behind the scenes is that the reversed property of the TimelineLite is being set, and if I were to move on to my next method, which is resume, that would mean continue playback in whatever direction you're currently set to go. So this is a great segue for how resume works. And I'm just going to tell the resume handler to tell my TimelineLite to resume. So remember that force resume is set to false in my reverse function. And now if I play and I pause, let's focus on what resume does. Resume automatically says, hey, keep going in the direction you were previously going. If I pause and now reverse, again, we're not forcing resume, so I could manually hit resume, and now it goes backwards. I'd probably say that most of the time, whenever you reverse something, you're going to intend for the timeline to be playing in a reversed direction. So this is what you're normally going to see. But now you know that there's some tricks that you can use. So if I'm playing and I pause, resume goes forward. If I pause and reverse and then pause again, resume is going to continue going backwards. And now, fast forward, all you guys are thinking, oh, come on, Carl, another method? I know you're just going to say TimelineLite dot fast forward. Oops, sorry guys, it's going to get a little different here. There is no fast forward method built into TimelineLite. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the properties that we already know about to simulate a fast forward. And if you remember from last time, we talked about the time scale. So I'm going to say TL.timescale equals 4. And what that means is that we're going to play 4 times as fast. So I'm going to save this, and we're going to test it out. And now if I'm playing and I hit fast forward, you'll see that it goes super fast. Okay? Now you might say, hey, that's great, I just programmed a fast forward button. But you also just introduced a few bugs to your little app, because now if I go to reverse, watch what happens. The time scale is still set to 4. So when I hit reverse, I didn't mean fast reverse, I just wanted normal reverse. So once I've added that whole time scale deal, I need to correct that. So here you'll see we're setting the time scale to 4. So whenever we want to continue playback with our other buttons, we need to be able to reset that time scale back to 1. Now, handy for me, I have a method named here called reset timescale. And what reset timescale is going to do is tell my TimelineLite to bring its timescale back to 1. Now, I need to make sure that I call this method whenever I play or resume my TimelineLite, and even reverse it. So let's go to my play handler, and before I play, I'm going to say reset timescale. Now remember, reset timescale is my own method name here, and we'll just do this. I'm going to do a little copy, and very quickly whenever I reverse, I'm also going to want to make sure that I'm reversing at the proper speed. If I had ever paused this and then resumed, I would also want to make sure that the time scale has been reset. Alright, so we'll play. And the issue was that if I were to fast forward and then pause, playing again would be super fast, but now you'll see that it is normal speed. If I reverse, it's also going quite slow. And watching this progress bar is probably the best way to keep an eye on the speed. If I fast forward, what? Did he make another mistake? No, that was intentional, because that's the next problem we have, just when you think everything's going good. So I'm going to play, and what exactly happened there? I was fast forwarding, and then when I reversed, I went back slow. But look what happens. When I'm reversing and I hit fast forward, it's fast backward. What? What does that mean? Also watch, if I'm playing and I pause and then hit fast forward, it doesn't move. What's going on? Well, the problem here is that fast forward is only setting the time scale equal to 4. It's not saying play in the forward direction. And likewise, if I'm reversing and I hit fast forward, it sets time scale to 4 and everything goes super quick. So whenever I want to fast forward, I need to make sure that I am going forward. We have the fast part down. That's set. But right now, I need to also make sure that I'm playing in a forward direction. So I'm going to say TL.play. And again, it's these little things that, now that you know them, they're not really an issue at all. And hopefully this makes sense to you. So whenever I hit fast forward, I'm moving forward, and I'm moving forward fast. So now if I'm playing and I pause, fast forward will get me out of that pause. Pausing again and playing, and it's slow. Reversing is fine. Now while I'm reversing, if I hit fast forward, it's going to speed up in the forward direction. So all of those buttons are now working as you expected. The last one we're going to deal with is restart. But before I get there, you've seen me click all these buttons and you're like, he's finally fixed it all. Well, watch. Let's hit play again. Huh? Why isn't play playing it? Well, unlike a movie clip symbol, if we're at the end of our timeline and I hit play, play only means play forward. It doesn't mean, oh, if you're at the end of the timeline, go back to the beginning and play again. We would have to account for this situation here. Now, the restart button has the functionality built in where it will say, always set the current progress to 0 and play from the beginning. So let me show you how restart works, and then we'll deal with that little play bug at the end. And we can go back to our method names now making perfect sense to us, and I'm just going to say TL.restart. And restart means go back to the beginning and play. So if I fast forward to the end, just to get down there, remember play is busted right now, but restart is what we do to go back to the beginning and continue playing. And if I happen to fast forward here and go back to restart, notice that it's still fast forwarding. You gotta be sharp here. So restart is also going to be one where we need to reset the time scale. And I think I did camel case that, right? I would have. And we'll do that. Very good, Carl. So you just want to keep an eye on these sorts of things popping up. I'll test that fast forward out just so you know I'm correct. Hit fast forward, we're going to go all the way to the end, and now when I hit restart, it's implied that it's going to be starting from the beginning, now at the normal pace. Remember, if I didn't put reset time scale in there, the time scale would have been set at 4 from when I hit fast forward. And we still have that issue of when we play to the end, hitting play does not bring us back to the beginning. Well, the play method is doing exactly what it's supposed to do, but if we want to make this interface more intuitive for our users, we could put a little conditional in here, and I'm going to say if the TL's current progress equals 1. that means, is the TimelineLite finished playing? If that is true, I'm just going to tell the TimelineLite's current progress to be equal to 0, which means move the virtual playhead back to the beginning. And as you can see, current progress is a property that we can not only read, but we can also write to it. We can set its value. So I'll test this out. And now if I play all the way to the end, I love watching this, but let's fast forward. We don't have all day. If I'm at the end, hitting play now will work similarly to restart because we told it to. In this next section, we're going to be using a slider component to control the playback of a TimelineLite. Let's jump over to my FLA that I have here, and you'll notice that I have a slider component on the stage. And I'm going to open up my properties panel, and we're going to just take a look at what we have here. I've given it the instance name slider, and what's important is that the maximum value is going to be 100 and the minimum value is going to be 0. If you have value of just 0 and a maximum of 1, it's pretty much impossible to use, your slider. So we're going to be using our slider to generate a value between 0 and 100, and then we're going to be normalizing it to be a number between 0 and 1 because we're going to be controlling the current progress of the TimelineLite. So there's my slider component. In my main action script file, I just want to point out that whenever you use the slider component, you're most likely going to need to import the slider and also the slider event. So you will see that we are setting up a reference to my slider as well. Once everything's on the stage and we run our init function, you'll see that I'm telling the slider to add the event listener of slider event thumb drag. And that means that whenever that little thumb grabber is being dragged around, it's going to be announcing that event. And we're going to be responding with slider change. So all the way down at the bottom here, you'll see that I have my slider change handler set up. And all I need to do is very simple. Let's just start off by tracing out slider.value, just so you can see what that does. I'm going to save, and let me just bring my output panel over where you can see it. And now you will see that when I drag my scrubber, I'm getting a value of 5 here. Let's just bring this all the way up. And if I go all the way to the right, I'm going to be getting values of 100. So my slider is working. As I drag it, it's generating these numbers for me. Well, I don't want a number between 0 and 100. I want a number between 0 and 1. So what I can do is take slider value and multiply it by 0.01. And this is going to be the value that we're going to be using for our current progress. So now you'll see that I'm getting very small numbers, and the largest number that I get is 1. Perfect. So here, it's no longer any sort of mad science. I'm just going to tell my TL to set its current progress value equal to slider.value times 0.01. And we're almost there, folks. This is going to work awesome. I'm going to now show you that I can scrub right through the movie. All right, the end. Well, it's not exactly the end because I want to play. And you'll see now that as I'm playing, I'm already tracking the current progress, but my slider isn't responding to the TimelineLite playing on its own. The slider can control the TimelineLite, but the TimelineLite isn't controlling my slider. So we can easily fix that. I already have a method in here that we used in a previous exercise called track progress. And track progress is being called on update of my TimelineLite. So on update, we're calling track progress. Every time the TimelineLite updates itself, we are stretching that movie clip that we have on the stage. And I'm also going to tell my slider to set its value equal to the TimelineLite's current progress. And remember, the current progress is between 0 and 1, but the slider value is 0 and 100. So we're going to multiply by 100. I'm going to save, and now everything's going to be totally in sync. When I play, you will see that that little thumb dragger is moving, and also this progress bar is growing. When I pause, everything stops. When I scrub back, everything is totally in sync. It's awesome. All right, folks, I have a bonus round for you. Yes, we're going to talk about creating a toggle button to toggle the playback of the TimelineLite. This is awesome. So let's scroll down to where we have our pause handler in here. And we've used the pause method here. And I've also mentioned to you that there's also a paused property. And saying tl.pause is the same thing as saying tl.paused equals true. Okay, and just to illustrate that, I'm going to show you that I can play, and then pause button does exactly that. But what if we wanted my pause button to be a play pause button, meaning that if it was playing, then it would pause. If it was paused, then it would play. That's very simple to do because I can use this pause property and do it, I call over on snorkel.tv the switcheroo. And I'm going to say tl.paused equals the inverse of the current state of tl.paused. So we're just doing a switcheroo on the paused property. So let's save it and let's play. And right now I'm going to start playing it. So the paused property is false, but if I click once, it sets pause to true. If I click again, it sets pause to false. So now I have one button that can work as a play pause. And that's the quick bonus for you guys. Pretty cool, huh? That pretty much is going to wrap up our topic of basic TimelineLite playback controls. Now I mentioned in the beginning of this tutorial that I was going to be talking about how that awesome dynamic text effect worked. And right here, just to go back to that, I'm going to just take a few moments and explain this to you guys. If you got what you needed with the methods, hey, that's great. If you want to see how this really works a little bit more, stick around. I'm not kicking you out. So let's just say the phrase equals awesome way to build a timeline light. And every now and then I like to be proper, capital T. So here we have our phrase. I'm going to jump over to the FLA real quick, open up my library, and I want to show you that I have this symbol in here with a linkage identifier of word. Let's double click on that, and you will see that we have a text field on the stage, and if I go to my properties panel, you'll see that it has label text there, and that text is centered. So that's what the symbol looks like, and let's go to actually properties so you can see them. And here I want to show you that it uses a class of word. And we're going to be using this class to instantiate these text fields on our stage and populate them with text. I know a lot of you guys would just dynamically create text fields. I like to use the Flash IDE to my advantage whenever possible. So in main.as, I want to show you that once we set up our phrase, words array takes that phrase and splits it based on the space character. So now I have an array of all these different words. And then when I create my timeline, here this loop is going to iterate through the words array. And for every word in that array, we're going to create a new word. We're going to set the label text of that word to be the current word in the array. And we're going to position the X and Y of that word roughly in the center of the stage. And we're going to start out with an alpha of 0. And we're also going to start out with the scale being very large. So when every new word is placed on the stage, it's invisible and huge. And then for each word, we're just telling my TimelineLite to add a single tween max tween that takes it from a small scale to an alpha of 1. So what you're going to see is when this from tween runs, every word is going to start small and visible, and then as it grows, it's going to fade out. And that's exactly the effect that you're going to see right here when I play. Awesome way to build a TimelineLite. So I could literally type in 100 words and have them all animate. So once all that happens, I'm fading in the jumper MC, I'm tweening to frame 52, then the jumper MC sliding to the right, and the end MC is going to slide in. So like I said in the beginning, it doesn't really matter how the TimelineLite was built, we're here to control it. But I really think that a lot of you guys are going to pick up on this technique really well, and you'll see exactly how far you can do it when you start making your TimelineLites dynamic. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this. I'm amped to come back next time with our series, and we're going to be talking about adding labels to our TimelineLites and using them as a way to navigate a TimelineLite. All right, folks, take it easy. I'll catch you soon.